Jamuna Tiro Bana Chari Jamuna Tiro Bana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodhanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yasodhanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiro Banachari Yamuna Tiro Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Jai Ho Prabhupada Mansa Paribhraja Acharya Stakara Smada Tham Saraswati Goswami Goswami Jai Ananda Gauri Vaishnava Ki Jai Rama Thakur Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Nain Sutta Ho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Sri Radha Krishna Bho Gopinath Sam Kanda Radha Kanda Giri Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Guru Dwarka Dham Ki Jai Swami Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai All glories to the All glories to the Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada. All glories to our revered speaker for today, His Grace HARI-SAURI Prabhu, and all glories to Vaishnavi devotees. Devotees, we are very much fortunate to have His Grace HARI-SAURI Prabhu to be with us today. Some of us may not have met him in person before, but I believe every one of us has seen him somewhere on social media before. And we've read about him also from lots of the wonderful scriptures we have. So we're very much grateful to have his association with us today. And Prabhuji, you are very much warmly welcome to Hare Krishna, Africa. And
Hare Krishna, thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. With that being said, I believe this must be your first time. Our style of speaking Bhagavatam is not different from like the temple room setting. So you chant the verse. Some do the transliteration and then the translation purport, and then they share the realization on the text. And then if there is enough time, we have questions and answers, and we bring it to the end. And so that's what we do.
Okay.
Prabhupada has already chanted the Jaya Radha Madhava. Some devotees also prefer to chant the Jaya Radha Madhava themselves. If you decide to do that, you may do that. Otherwise, we just go by Srila Prabhupada chanting the Jaya Radha Madhava. Hare Krishna.
I do have a question. How long is the session?
It sometimes goes on for about 2 hours, um, depending on the mood of the speaker and the response from the audience. But technically, is dependent on the mood of the speaker.
Okay, well, I'll do my best.
Okay.
I do have some health issues that I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
Right now, I've got a really sore throat, but
Okay.
I hope that when I'm speaking comes out clearly.
Okay. All right. That should be
So,
fine.
all right, so shall I begin?
Yes. So I'm going to put the verse on the screen, and then you may begin. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 1, verse 40. Aho. I'll read the Sanskrit and then we'll do the response on the English. Aho Pitapi Driyate Bhakarate Rajashi Varyena Vinapitena Yastweka Viro Rato Vijigye Dano Dvitiya Kakubash Chatasra. All right, we'll do the synonyms. Although there's no response, right? Let's just move on to the English verse. Okay. Translation. O my Lord, is Prita still living? She lived only for the sake of her fatherless children. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to live without King Pandu, who was the greatest commander and who alone conquered the 4 directions simply with the help of a second bow. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. A faithful wife cannot live without her lord, the husband, and therefore all widows used to voluntarily embrace the burning fire which consumed the dead husband. This system was very common in India because all the wives were chaste and faithful to their husbands. Later on, with the advent of the age of Kali, the wives gradually began to be less adherent to their husbands, and the voluntary embrace of the fire by the widows became a thing of the past. Very recently, the system was abolished, since the voluntary system had become a forcible social custom. When Maharaj Pandu died, both his wives, namely Kunti and Madri, were prepared to embrace the fire. But Madri requested Kunti to live for the sake of the younger children, the 5 Pandavas. This was agreed upon by Kunti at the added request of Vyasadeva. In spite of her great bereavement, Kunti decided to live, not to enjoy life in the absence of her husband, but only to give protection to the children. This incident is referred to here by Vidura because he knew all the facts about his sister-in-law, Kunti Devi. it is understood that Maharaj Prandu was a great warrior, and that he alone, with the help of bow and arrow, could conquer the world's 4 directions. In the absence of such a husband, it was almost impossible for Kunti to live on, even as a widow, but she had to do it for the sake of the 5 children. Okay. So this is one of the great personalities of the Mahabharata. And okay, what's happening here? Can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhuji, we can hear you clearly. Yes.
Okay, I've just
Thank you.
some distraction on the screen there. So,
Yeah.
Kunti Devi, she's one of the great personalities of the Mahabharata, and also we have the Srimad Bhagavatam, because we know that Prabhupada often quoted from prayers of Queen Kunti to Krishna, wonderful verses describing the character of the devotee and the reliance upon Krishna. Lord Krishna had been constantly associated with the Pandavas through all the trials and tribulations which was heaped upon them by the Kauravas. Then, after the war was over, then Krishna was going to leave the Pandavas in Hastinapur and go back to Dwarka. So then Queen Kunti came in, although she was technically Krishna's aunt, so that meant that he, because the nephew and the niece, they have to offer their respects to their father and mother, the aunt, or the uncle. But Queen Kunti, she knew eternal relationship with Krishna, and so when she addressed him, she did so very feelingly, recognizing him as the Supreme Lord, rather than just being her nephew. And she famously told Krishna that we would rather go back and be in the war again than have the situation that we have now, because at least when we were in various difficulties and trials and troubles, we were always there to guide us and associate with us. But now that everything is peaceful, now you're leaving us. So that's worse. We would rather be in the war than lose your association. So this is a mood of a real devotee. Throughout life, we have to face so many tribulations and problems. But a devotee doesn't think, why is this happening to me? I remember one story about there was one devotee who'd been Prabhupada's personal servant, and they were in Calcutta. This is in the early 70s when Prabhupada was just setting up his ISKCON there. And this boy was struggling with his health. That was always a factor in the early days for most of the Western devotees. They were not accustomed to the heat, the humidity, the food. Practically everybody got sick, got dysentery and so many other things, mosquitoes. So they're getting lots of malaria. So it was quite tough. But Prabhupada was always there leading the charge. So this boy, anyway, he wanted to go back to America. So Prabhupada told him that he could go. And he spent a day or two in the Calcutta temple before he flew out. And one of my other god brothers that was there at the time, he saw this boy lying on a mat on the ground, and he was groaning and moaning and saying, "Krishna, why are you doing this to me?" So, needless to say, he didn't last very long in devotional service, active service. A devotee never thinks, no matter what happens, that Krishna is punishing him. He takes it rather that this is just to show me that this body is perishable. It's not going to last forever. And this is Krishna's helping me to understand that I'm not the body, that I'm his eternal servant. So that mood is there. It has to be there. We accept that whatever happens to us is, first of all, arranged by Krishna. We, no matter what situation we're in, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, the devotee always thinks that this is Krishna's arrangement for me at this time. So he doesn't, if he's in a so-called unfavorable situation, he doesn't look and blame his surroundings or the people that he's working with. We see that just like in America, the litigation that goes on there is phenomenal, because as soon as anybody gets in an unfavorable situation, the first thing they think about is, who can I sue? Who can I get some compensation, some money from? But actually, the real situation is that every living being is under the control of the super soul, and their wanderings in this material world are directed by the Lord within the heart. So if we understand that, then we know that whatever situation that we get into, this is by Krishna's arrangement. So if it's a so-called unfavorable situation, then that's a chance for a devotee to make real advancement. Sometimes the person, he may be very devoted, very loyal, and very capable, but at the same time, he may not be fully surrendered, let's say. So Krishna puts that person into difficulty because he knows that this will bring his devotional sentiments to the highest level. So we see that with Srila Prabhupada. When he left Calcutta in 1965, he had no money, he had no contacts in America that he knew. He was living in India for the first time on a boat, 70 years old. And he spent the first 9 months or so, first in Butler and then in New York. And when he was in New York, he had practically no place to stay. He had no money. He had to he sold a set of his books, the first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. He sold the set to Mr. Pandya, the ship's captain. And with that $20 that he got from that was what he was landing in a humongous city like New York with nothing, literally nothing. Somehow or another, he got some contacts. There was one Dr. Mishra there that was teaching yoga courses. So Prabhupada had been given his address. He went to see Mishra, so Dr. Mishra helped him out for a while. But he was a Mayavadi, so they were philosophically at odds. But Prabhupada was living like a vagabond. He got his own place. It was a room with no windows, no water, and Prabhupada was staying there. It was the coldest winter in recorded history in New York. Prabhupada had never seen snow before. He had no winter coats. So somehow or another, he was just pushing on. Later on, he got a place. He was invited to stay with a young man in the Bowery, the red light district of New York. It was where all the alcoholics and bums used to lie down on the street. Prabhupada sometimes had to step over a drunk person to get up into this apartment that he was staying in. It wasn't an apartment, actually. It was what was it called? An AIR, artist in residence. So it's like warehouse space. And people with the low budget income, they could rent those AIR floor space, and they would hang up some curtain to make different sections. So Prabhupada was staying with this boy for some time. The boy himself was nice, but he was taking LSD or some other drug. So one time he came back, Prabhupada was there, and this boy was showing signs of becoming crazy. And at one point, Prabhupada had to run out and out onto the street because he was fearful that this boy would do something completely mad. So then he couldn't stay there. Then he had to get another place. So this is, you can just imagine a 70-year-old small Indian man in the street in New York, of all places, with nothing. He had already had his a typewriter and some other items that he owned. That he was the office block that he was living in. Somebody broke into his room, and so whatever few things he had was stolen. So he was literally, as he himself said, I was just like a vagabond, and no support from anywhere. But he said, somehow or other, I just felt that I should keep on trying to do something. He would go down to the port area, and he would inquire from the shipping clerk when what's the name of the shipping company was Samati Maharaj's shipping line. She'd given him the ticket to come to America, and he had a return ticket guaranteed if he wanted to come back to India. So Prabhupada would go down to the ticketing office, India Steamship Company, and ask, when are you getting? When do you have another boat going back to India? And he did this 2 or 3 times. So then finally, the clerk asked Prabhupada, Swamiji, you're always asking when is the next boat going back, but you never go. So Prabhupada told him, he said, yeah, when I get disappointed, then I think, let me go back. But actually, I want to stay and do something. So that was the situation. And Prabhupada never thought, oh, why is Krishna doing this to me? Why is he not giving me, help? Rather, he took it, I'm doing this not for my own gratification. I have to make an effort and try and please my Guru Maharaj. He wanted this preaching to go on in the English language. So America is the leader of the English-speaking world, and so it increased. It's what we call doubling down. He increased his devotion and his surrender, and when he was completely materially destitute, then at that point, then Krishna started to reciprocate in a very wonderful way. A few young men met Prabhupada, and sometimes he would give talks, and there's a couple of churches, Unitarian churches in New York, and at the bookstores, he would go and sell his books there. He said with great difficulty, but somehow or another, he was getting just enough income from selling his books so that he could rent a place to stay. So after he'd been chased out of that artist in residence apartment, then Mukunda, a boy called Michael Grant, later on became Mukunda Goswami. So he had met Prabhupada. Prabhupada told him what the problem was. So he decided to try to do something to help. So from the local newspapers, then he saw that there was this storefront up for rent, 26 Second Avenue. So he went there and he told Prabhupada about it. Prabhupada liked it. So there was a small storefront, and up in the back, on the second floor, there was a small apartment to go with it. So Prabhupada, he said, I took the risk. Whatever money I had, I took it for 1 month's rent in this 26 Second Avenue. And that was it. He put a sign up in the window, Bhagavad Gita classes. What was it? Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And he would give lectures. Just a few people were coming, and then a few more gradually increased. And as it increased, then Prabhupada began to create this ISKCON society. So by mid-July of 66, Prabhupada finally got himself settled. And then these boys started to come. Brahmananda, Kirtananda, Hayagriva, Satsarup, and so many of them. And they started to take him very seriously. Prabhupada didn't make any compromises. He was speaking just on the basis of Shastra. He was very learned, of course, so he would tell them about Lord Chaitanya, his movement, and it was almost like a miracle. These boys started coming, and once they heard Prabhupada speak, that was it. They were captured. It's not like Prabhupada was putting on a big show, like some charismatic, so-called yogi or Sadguru or whatever they call him. He was just very simple and straightforward, very knowledgeable. But the main thing is that his heart was completely clean. So he could give classes with full realization. And when you spoke with Prabhupada, there was no, you couldn't detect any kind of ego or selfish interest. He was completely open and transparent. So as he explained to the boys that the guru has to be completely transparent via media, so that whatever comes through the guru's mouth is actually Krishna. And Prabhupada, one of his main aims was to destroy the impersonal understanding of the Supreme. He wanted to explain Krishna was a person, but not an ordinary person, a transcendental person. And that, I think, was what attracted a lot of devotees, was that Prabhupada was completely honest. You could put your full faith in him, and he just naturally developed real devotional sentiments, because Prabhupada himself was a real devotee. So 67, see, Prabhupada goes to San Francisco on 1st of January. And again, the same person, Mukunda, he had gotten initiated in, I think, about September of 66. And he had told Prabhupada that he was driving over to the West Coast. So Prabhupada seemingly casually said, why don't you see if you can open up another center there? So when Mukunda got to California, then he said that request of Prabhupada stuck with him. And so he went out and he found another storefront with an apartment up at the back, just like they had in New York. And so the San Francisco temple opened very quickly. Prabhupada took his first flight in an aeroplane, and he landed there in San Francisco. About 50 or 60 people were there to greet him at the airport. There was Allen Ginsberg, who was very famous at that time, poet. And things just happened like magic. Shyama Sundar and Malati, they had been up in the north. They were friends with Mukunda, so he dropped off to see them on his way down to California. And they immediately left what they were doing, came down to San Francisco, met Prabhupada at the airport, and that was it. They became his sold out followers. And many others came. Gurudas, Jamuna, because Jamuna met Prabhupada earlier in New York when his sister was getting married to Mukunda. So from that time on, things started to expand. And Prabhupada told me, he said that from 1968, that was when this movement really began. 68, they had about 5 centers, and Prabhupada had started to formulate some kind of sadhana process. He got devotees, he introduced them to chanting japa. They were already into public chanting, and just the power of the holy name attracted so many new people. Prabhupada did say actually that Krishna had arranged for devotees to be born in these cities, and so they were there waiting for Prabhupada. They didn't know it, but they were there waiting for Prabhupada to start this movement and to assist him, just like when Krishna goes and performs his leelas. He comes down onto the planet. His associates and the demigods, they take birth on the planet at the same time that Krishna is there, and then he does his leelas, and then they all go back to their former positions, spiritual positions. So in the same way, Prabhupada told us that the spiritual master, he also has his parishads, associates, and wherever he goes, they take birth in various places, and then when he comes through, then immediately they get attracted, and they come back to do their devotional activities. So Prabhupada was from about 1968 onwards expanding very rapidly. By the time, let's see, about 1971, when Prabhupada took ISKCON to India, he had about 500 disciples. They had a couple of dozen temples, and everything was, really taking off. He was able to get his books published. Initially, I think the Bhagavad Gita, he had his manuscript for that. There's a story about Brahmananda. So he had gone around to different publishing houses to try to get them to print Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is. But he was not successful. So he was feeling a bit despondent about that. But Prabhupada told him, one day they got a letter from somebody from Macmillan Publishing Company. And it was an order for a Hare Krishna record album that they'd made. And so he told Prabhupada, we've got a letter from somebody from the Macmillan Publishing Company. So Prabhupada said, all right, take the manuscript and go and see him. So then Brahmananda said, well, what shall I say? What shall I tell him? Prabhupada said, just show him that my Guru's made this commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. So Brahmananda went. He was disappointed to find out that the person that had ordered the record album, was just working in, not directly in the publishing field in the company, but maybe in the accounts or something like that. So as he was talking with this fellow, another man came in, and he was the editor, one of the main editors of the Macmillan Company. And he had been putting together like a collection of books on Indian philosophy. So when he came in, Brahmananda just approached him and said, this is a manuscript for the Bhagavad Gita by my Guru. The man immediately said, oh, let me see. I was just looking for this. I'm doing a series of books, and I don't have a Bhagavad Gita. So I will take it and print it. So Brahmananda said, afterwards, he said, it's just one of the kind of little miracles that always seemed to occur whenever Prabhupada was doing anything. Prabhupada just when Ramananda came back and said that they're going to publish your Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada, he just smiled, and it's as if he knew what was going to happen. So Prabhupada was he was like an instrument for Krishna, for Lord Chaitanya. He had no other desire except to please Krishna, and due to his devotion, Krishna reciprocated and created this worldwide movement. I was with Prabhupada one time in 1974 in Melbourne, in Australia. I had joined a couple of years before that in Sydney. Prabhupada used to come to Australia at least 1 week in every year from 1971 through to 1976. And book distribution was just becoming a big thing at that point. The BBT had been set up a couple of years before. Prabhupada was getting out regularly new volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He'd done the Krishna book series. He'd done Teachings of the Lord Chaitanya, Nectar of Devotion. These were all summary studies. And at the same time, he was translating the Bhagavatam on a daily basis. So Prabhupada's books became the focus of our our endeavors. When I first joined the movement in '72, the main activity that we had was just going on the street and chanting. We had some back to Godheads. That was another thing that Prabhupada revived when he got to America. And we'd go out for 6 hours or 7 hours a day. We'd go chanting up and down the streets and try and sell these back to Godheads. Then when the books started coming out, then Prabhupada told us that this was the real Sankirtan activity, was selling his books. So things started to boom. Prabhupada had come to Australia as a result of, he was going to come in 1973, but he got sick in Mayapur. Then on the last minute, he left there and he went to London, and they had the London Rath Yatra. And Prabhupada danced and chanted. There were thousands of people in the parade. And Prabhupada was at the front chanting and dancing all the way. So in Australia, we've been told Prabhupada is not coming because he was too ill. Then a few weeks later, we heard about him going the whole length of the route in London with the Rath carts. So we were disappointed that he didn't come to Australia. So he told the GBC at that time, Madhudvita Swami, that if you come top of the book distribution scores, then I'll come to your Melbourne Rath Yatra. So although there weren't that many devotees, actually, there was probably about 50 or 60. And we worked really hard. And as a result of that, Prabhupada agreed to come for Rath Yatra. We held that very successfully. He was very happy with that. So what I was going to say is that I was trying to figure out Prabhupada's godbrothers. They had the same practices, the same Guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. They had the same instructions. They had the same uh, um, uh, I mean, they had what Prabhupada had, but when they came to London after 2 or 3 years, that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati called them back, and then not made any progress in getting Krishna consciousness in a foothold in the Western countries. Actually, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he had decided that if these men that he sent in 1933 to London were successful, that he would go there himself and sit there and preach from London. But in the end, they couldn't do anything, and they came back. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was sending 700 rupees a month, which was a lot of money at that time, to rent a place for these 3 men in London. So after taking so much money, they did some preaching work, but they couldn't make anybody into a devotee. I think one woman, Mrs. Botel, but that was it. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was quite disgusted. The leader of that small party, he was a bit of a scholar and well spoken. He's from a high class Indian family, and he would go to universities. He would get some speaking engagements. He would discuss with big politicians. At that time, of course, India was under the rule of the British. So he met Lord Zetland. Zetland was the Governor General of at least Bengal. So he received him very nicely. And he famously asked this sannyasi, "Can you make me a Brahmana? Can you make me into a Brahmana?" So the reply was, "Yes. You just follow these principles. Don't eat meat, don't intoxicate, don't have illicit sex, don't gamble." And Zetland's response was, "Impossible." So anyway, they had gone there and they weren't successful. Then Prabhupada comes 20, 30 years later. And as soon as that initial period was over of impoverishment, then ISKCON started to expand like anything. And so I asked Prabhupada, I said, "How is it that you God brothers, I mean, they have the same philosophy, the same practices, but how is it that they were not successful?" And I think I said that, they were sincere, but so Prabhupada stopped me and said, "They were never sincere. We had the same facilities, but Prabhupada made it clear that they were not sincere. So they couldn't actually do anything tangible." So Prabhupada's mood, Prabhupada's consciousness, he was completely surrendered. That's sincerity. That whatever the spiritual master asks you to do, then if you can fulfill that, or at least you make a proper attempt, then that's your success. So Prabhupada told us that I asked him, we're selling so many books now, and still there's not that many people coming to the temple. So Prabhupada kind of chastised me, not exactly chastised me, but he was a little sharp in his response. He said, "That is up to Krishna. It's not for us to decide whether we're doing well or not. We just go out. Our duty is just to serve Krishna and sell the books. That's all. And don't be worried about anything else." So Prabhupada was a unique individual, even amongst the the Vaishnavas. He demonstrated devotional service on a scale that's never been seen before. The rapid development of ISKCON. There was one professor in Pennsylvania, I think. What was his name? I just forget his name now. We went to a not a memorial, but a day of celebration of ISKCON's, I think, 30th anniversary. So this professor got up, he said, if you look at all the great religions of the world, then it took many years, hundreds of years, for them to grow, like the Christians or the Muslims. Even they actually took a long time for the practices and religious philosophies to be accepted and spread. Prabhupada said, but this man said that Prabhupada has done something which is unparalleled in modern history. He did more in 10 years than the Buddhists, the Christians, the Muslims had done in hundreds of years. Prabhupada did everything in just 10 short years. So he was an amazing personality. And at the same time, he was just very simple, very humble. I traveled with him for about 1.5 years. And I was just, I mean, we were all in awe of Srila Prabhupada. It just, his absolute surrender and his humility, completely ego-less. So by his personal example, he showed us what's possible to do. He had 5,000 disciples initiated. The 108 temples that he had when he left the planet, now there's probably 850, I think, and I heard that figure. We got millions of people coming to the temples, especially in India. Rath Yatra in so many cities in the world. I think in Malaysia, they have 35 Rath Yatras every year, going from one place to another. And we're in China, we're in Russia. It's just unbelievable. It's difficult to conceive. The older I get, now I'm 74. So I have so many problems, but nothing compared to what like Prabhupada had. When I was traveling with him, he had a diseased kidney, wasn't working sometimes. He had diabetes. He had uremia, where your hands and legs puff up with too much fluid because the kidney's not working properly. Its teeth were all falling out. I have one of those actually at my house. But he was what they call stoic. He took everything without complaint. He was just on a completely other level. Whatever happened to his body. And he had there were several times during the course of that 1970s when we thought that Prabhupada was going to leave, and we had 24-hour kirtan. When we got back to Vrindavan in 1977 in October, that was his last 6 weeks there. I had been sent back to Australia at the beginning, just after Gopurnima in 1977. I left Prabhupada's personal service. He sent me back to Australia and made me the GBC there. Then later on in the year, in May, Prabhupada had been in Rishikesh, and after a few days there, then there was some big storm, and Prabhupada told the devotees, I may leave at any time, so take me back to Vrindavan. So Prabhupada came back in May to Vrindavan. He made a will, which I'm sure you've seen, and somehow or another he pulled through. Then he made one last trip to London. He couldn't walk, so just to even roll over on his side, he had to be helped to do that. So his body was finished, but still he wanted to go to London and have one last. He was planning that he would visit the farming communities in America, and we had a farm in Australia. There's several other places. So Prabhupada said that would be the next phase of his movement, would be to establish Varnashram. So like that, Prabhupada was unceasingly engaged in thinking about how to spread Krishna consciousness as much as possible for the pleasure of his Guru Maharaj. So we have a uncommon opportunity. There's never been an acharya in the past who's spread Krishna consciousness on the scale that Prabhupada did. And the legacy that he left, we tend to take it for granted. There's so many videos of Prabhupada, films of Prabhupada, and thousands of recorded lectures. So we have an opportunity to have that direct association with Prabhupada through his Vani, through his teachings. It's been made very easy for us. So if we don't take advantage of it, that's another thing. But sometimes people say it's a miracle. Prabhupada told us, he said, I don't know anything about miracles. I'm just trying to do my humble best to serve my Guru Maharaj. So in the summer of 77, when Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, one day this sannyasi, God brother, came to see him. And he was the one who had been sent to London. So at one point, there was a god brother of Prabhupada called Krishnadas Babaji, Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji. They were very great friends. And Babaji was a very joyful person. He was a Babaji. He was one of the few people that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had given Babaji initiation to, because in India, at least, the Babajis, they only business is to chant Hare Krishna. So Krishnadas Babaji was famous. They're always chanting. Whenever we met him, if he was having a conversation, he would say something, and then when the other person was replying, he would be chanting. So he was always chanting. So if anybody knew anything about chanting, Krishnadas Babaji was the one. So he was visiting Prabhupada, and then this other god brother that had gone to London, he came. So at one point, Krishnadas Babaji asked him, he said, "What's the difference between you and Swami Maharaj?" That was Prabhupada's sannyas name, actually, Swami Maharaj. Most of the Gaudiya Mat people call him that. So he asked this man, what's the difference between you and Swami Maharaj? He speaks fluid English. You speak fluid English. He's a scholar. You're a scholar. He went to the West. You went to the West. He was successful. You were not. Why? And then he answered his own question. He said, because he had great faith in the holy names. So that's Prabhupada in a nutshell. He just had this complete and utter faith in his spiritual master and in Krishna. As a result of that, Krishna reciprocated in a wonderful way. So I just want one other short thing. Prabhupada told us that his father, Gomohan Day, he used to tell him when he was a child that Krishna has 10 hands and you have 2. So if Krishna wants to take everything away from you, with your 2 hands, how will you stop him with his 10 hands? He said, and conversely, if Krishna wants to give you with 2 hands, how will you receive everything that he can give you with 10 hands? So he said, now I see the truth in that I had nothing. And then now I have this international society. So many millions of dollars are being spent every year. So he said, I can see Krishna's giving me more than I can, handle. So Prabhupada was, by example, by teaching, it's every bit as exalted as Queen Kunti, the Pandavas, Krishna's personal associates. He got the blessings of the Lord and fully manifested. So who knows? I mean, in hundreds of years to come, we expect that this movement will continue expanding. Prabhupada did say that we were on a train from Allahabad to Calcutta in January of '77. We've been to the Kumbh Mela. Prabhupada spent 4 or 5 days there. Then we traveled across the country overnight. And Prabhupada told us, he said that history will mark this period when the Krishna consciousness movement saved the world. And so we've just got to remain surrendered, whatever situation we're in. Try and think about Krishna, speak about Krishna, chant Hare Krishna, and feel very thankful that we have such a wonderful founder of Charya as Srila Prabhupada. He was an exceptional person, no doubt. So I'll wind up there. If we have any questions or comments, we can take a few. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. His Grace HARI-SAURI Prabhu. We are just about 4 weeks away from honoring Srila Prabhupada's appearance, which always comes a day after Sri Krishna's appearance. And it is very interesting and very beautiful that you can help us enter into the mood of receiving Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada in our midst again. It's so beautiful, my goodness. Dear devotees, if anyone may have questions, comments, realizations, especially on this theme that you may want to ask or share, please indicate by using the hand emoji or your physical hand, and you'll be asked to unmute to speak. But excuse me to say this before anybody asks a question or says something. Prabhuji, we would like to offer our humblest apologies to you because you had shared that you're not feeling quite well. You're having some sort of sore throat, and we've engaged you using same voice to speaking to us for more than an hour. So our sincerest apologies to you, and we pray to their lordships to help relieve you of this sore throat, because as much as it is, most of us would like to hear lots of these transcendental pastimes of Srila Prabhupada and his devotees and Sri Krishna ultimately. So we wish you speedy and healthy recovery, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
So, dear devotees, if you may have something to ask or share, please, you may go ahead. Hare Krishna. To some of you who might not know, HARI-SAURI Prabhu joined the movement and took initiation sometime in early part of 72. And I read a short while ago when Srila Prabhupada was giving Prabhuji's initiation name. And when he gave the name, Srila Prabhupada said, Sauri means a learned scholar. And Hari, of course, means Krishna. So he is a learned scholar. And then Srila Prabhupada says that Lord Chaitanya says, anyone who knows the science of Krishna is a guru. So from the very onset, Srila Prabhupada indicated that our dear uncle here, and maybe great uncle to some of us gathered here, is a guru. And Prabhuji demonstrated that by being the pioneer of the Bhaktivedanta Research Center. And he was co-director until a few years ago. He had to retire or resign from the position because of some health challenges. He felt he could not participate as much as he definitely would like to. And to most of us, we know of his writings, of the diary writings. He shares his experiences and pastimes with Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhuji has done so much. And my question to you, Prabhuji, is that the amount of love and dedication you, direct disciples of Srila Prabhupada, had and still have for him, that you were ready to go any length, any breadth, and take any risk to serve and please him. What motivated you to do that? And how do we, as devotees today and devotees coming up tomorrow, try to emulate such same dedication you had and still have for Srila Prabhupada? This is my question, Prabhuji.
Okay. One thing is when we met Prabhupada, we were all very young, so we had a lot of teenage enthusiasm, and energy. When I joined the temple in Sydney, I was just turned 21. The temple president was 19 years old. And we had about, when I first joined the Sydney temple, I think there was 10 or 12 devotees. Prabhupada came 6 weeks later on the 1st of April, and there was 45 devotees. So in that 6 weeks, people just started coming from anywhere and everywhere. We would go out chanting, and of course it was a sensation in Australia at that time. 72 in Australia would be like 68 in America, same kind of development. And we go out chanting, you come back, and there'll be another new person at the door waiting to get shaved up or put on a sari. So there's a lot of enthusiasm. And what Prabhupada gave us radically changed our understanding of what life was. Before I got in contact with the devotees, I was miserable. I was always angry, frustrated, and I didn't know why. But I just couldn't. I just could not settle. And when I got to 20 years old, I got a assisted passage to Australia. The government, they would give you, if you met their qualifications, they were trying to build up the population in Australia at that time. It was only about 12 million. So they had this £10 passage scheme. You paid £10, they paid for the rest of the fare to bring you to Australia. And then if you stayed for 2 years, then you were absolved of any debt. If you left before 2 years were up, you had to pay back the money that they loaned you for getting the trip there. So I just wanted to get out of England, where I was born and brought up. So I went with a couple of friends, and we arrived in Sydney in mid-71. I didn't know it at the time, but Prabhupada had just been there about a week before. And I had some like out-of-body experience before we left England. And that just triggered in me, a lot of questions. How is it that I could be out of my body? And I mean, it was something that I knew I had to pursue. I knew it was important. But there's another level of reality, what I thought was reality. And so I was for months speculating about what life is, what we're here for. I couldn't understand what death was. And mostly this question kept coming into my mind: what is God? And that used to annoy me because I wasn't a religious person. I didn't like going to church. I stopped when I was 10 years old and become an atheist. Later on, when I was about 19, I started to realize that it's dishonest to say that there's no God. You can't know whether there is or there isn't. So I became like an agnostic. Anyway, there was a lot of gurus on the circuit at that time. Muktananda and this little fat kid that claimed to be an incarnation of Krishna, and a few others, Chidananda, Chinmayananda, this Ananda, that Ananda. So there was like a growing interest in yoga, gurus, Indian philosophy, etc. And every one of them, 7%, were Mayavadis. One example, I read a book. It had been recommended to me by a friend. After we arrived in Australia, we'd gone up to the northwest to the mining camps to earn some money. And one guy that I met there from New Zealand, he was telling me that he just read this book. I think, what was it, The First and Last Freedom or something, by J. Krishnamurti. So Krishnamurti was another popular figure on the Guru circuit. So he wrote a book that be your own guru. Don't go running after what other people have to say. You be your own guru. Be independent. And so I thought, I'll have a read of this book. So I purchased one when I was in Perth, and by that time I'd come to a stage where I couldn't stay in the material world anymore. I just didn't fit. And sometimes I'd go out on the work site in the mining camps and I'd look at everything and it was like it was a TV screen. I just felt completely disconnected. So my material life was running down. And spiritually, I had no idea what was going to happen. But I knew there was something there spiritual. So I read this book. I went straight to the table of contents, and I read I think it was the third chapter or something. Is there a God? So I went straight to that section of the book. So then he says, people often ask me, does God exist? Is there a God? So I tell them, if you think that there's a God, then there's a God. If you think there's no God, then there's no God. So I thought, this is completely bogus. He's either there or he's not. So his whole thing was, be your own guru. Don't become subordinate to any organization or church or temple or whatever. So, of course, there's another saying to that, whoever is his own guru as a fool for a disciple. So anyway, that was typical. Nobody knew what God was. So I went over to Sydney. On the way there, I stopped up in Melbourne. Now, when we first landed the year before in Australia, we'd gone downtown Sydney on the first day off the boat, and the devotees were there chanting on the street corner. And I had never seen them before. I didn't know who they were, but I was immediately attracted, to the chanting. And this girl came and she had some magazines, Back to Godhead. So I bought one of those. I think it gave it 20 cents or something. And she invited us to come to their Sunday feast at the temple. So we would, just landed in Australia. So I didn't go, but on the Sunday I did think about going there, but it was raining. And I had no idea what it meant, Sunday feast. Because in England, our impression of the feast was like medieval times. You're sitting 20, 30 guys sitting in the table eating a hog's head or dogs on the, feeding the dogs on the ground, that kind of thing. So I had no idea what it meant, Sunday feast. So I didn't go, but I kept that Back to Godhead with me. And it was the number 37. And on the front cover, there was the Rasa Leela. And when I got back to the hostel that we were staying in, we had a look at the magazine. And we couldn't figure out anything about what it was about. I'd never seen anything like it. Who were these little blue fellas dancing in a circle? So the closest we got to that was that one Scottish boy that we met on the boat. He said, "Oh, I think those blue fellas are spirits." That's a Christian, of course, but that was as close as we got. Then when I tried to read the magazine, I couldn't understand the word of it. It was so different from anything I'd ever read before. So somehow or another, I could feel that this is very important. I should keep this with me. So I did that. We went up to the north. I worked for 6 months up in the mining camps. Every now and again, I pull out this Back to Godhead, and each time I read it, it started to make a little more sense. So at the end of the year, I was completely dried out with my material activities. And the only thing that I could think of was to go to Sydney and find these people that had sold me this magazine and find out what it's all about. So I left my friends in the north. I went over to Melbourne, and then I was going to go to Sydney. So in Melbourne, the devotees had just gotten there, opened up a second temple there a few months before. So when I was walking to the city square, the devotees were there chanting. So immediately I went up to one of the devotees, Upananda. He had a stack of magazines. So the one that I had was 37. I think he had 38, 39, and 40. So I bought the ones that I didn't have. And then I asked him, "Do you have anything there that tells you what God is?" That was, by that time, that was my big question. I'd figured out that the material world was temporary and limited, and what I thought was reality was not. But there was one question that kept coming up, which I couldn't answer. I would get the complete blank, and that's what is God? So, as I say, this Krishnamurti, all these other gurus, they were all impersonalists, Mayavadis. Prabhupada was the only one who was telling people that God is a person. So I asked this question. So this devotee opened up the magazine, one of the magazines. To his credit, he had read them all. And there was one paragraph where Prabhupada gives a description of God. So he said, God is omniscient, God is omnipotent, God is omnipresent, and God is a person, and his name is Krishna. So I kept my finger in the magazine so I wouldn't lose the reference point. I went off to the riverbank nearby, took out the magazine and started reading it. And it was like light bulbs going off as I read each attribute. God is omniscient. He knows everything that's going on everywhere. It was like, when I read that, it was like a light bulb going off in my head. Then he's omnipotent. He's all powerful. You can't go anywhere without him. His influence. And then omnipresent, that is everywhere at once, all the time. So as I read these three things, it's like doing. And then finally, God is a person. And that was it. It was like a thousand light bulbs going off in my head. Of course, he has to be a person. If he knows everything and he's present everywhere and he's in control of everything, how could he not be a person? So that was it. And I realized now, if I accept this is true, I'm going to have to join these people. I had no idea how they lived, what the rules and regulations were, or anything. But on the basis of that, description of Srila Prabhupada's, then I found what I was looking for. Now I found the ultimate knowledge, God, and then I thought, his name is Krishna, and I thought, wow, that's far out. He's even got a name. So that was it. I got to Sydney. A few weeks later, I joined the temple, and I never looked back. And I was fortunate that I joined in mid-February of '72. Prabhupada came in April, so only 6 weeks later. And because we were a bit apprehensive about, meeting him, we were excited, but at the same time, there's a question: will he be as, the personality that we think he is? So one devotee, Upendra Prabhu, he had been Prabhupada's personal servant in 1967 in San Francisco. He's one of the earliest devotees. He and another devotee, Bali Mahadan, had come to Australia in '69 or '70 and started the movement in Australia. And when they went there penniless, and then were living in, what a squat is, so like a derelict house. So they were living in the squats in the red light district of Sydney. And somehow or another, they started the movement up. And they did it just because Prabhupada requested them to go and open the temple. That was all they had to say. And they immediately left. Bali Mahadan preached all around the, what they call the Pacific Rim. They went to Malaysia and Singapore and Japan. And Upendra, he stayed in Sydney. So he was still in Sydney when I joined. And he would tell us stories about Prabhupada every day. So one of the things he said, now Prabhupada's coming. We say that Krishna consciousness is the highest state of consciousness that you can come to. But there's actually an even higher state, and that's Prabhupada consciousness. So like that, we were building up to Prabhupada's arrival. And when he did arrive, I saw him get out of the taxi at the front of the temple. And Shyamasundar Prabhu, Nandakumar, Pradyumna were traveling with him. So when Prabhupada got out of the car, he was in the middle of the road. The first thing that struck me was that he's very small. Prabhupada was only 5'4". So that was what struck me first. He's physically very small, but he had this aura about him, not visible, but you could feel it. Just this tremendous spiritual presence. And automatically you wanted to get down and, bow your head at his feet. And he was there for a week. He went down to Melbourne for a couple of days. They had a program in the town hall. 2,000 people came, which was, for Australia, that was amazing. And he initiated some new disciples there. Then he came back to Sydney on the 9th of April. Then Prabhupada told us, whoever's in the temple, I'll initiate them. So 2 or 3 devotees that only been in the temple like a week or a couple of weeks. I'd only been in the temple 6 months. And no, 6 weeks, sorry. And Prabhupada just initiated everybody just to give us a boost. And at the end of his visit, I realized that we'd just spent like a week thinking about Prabhupada 24 hours a day. So that was
Prabhupada's potency. And just seeing Prabhupada once a year for a few days was enough to give you the fuel and the enthusiasm to go out preaching for the rest of the year. And we had, lots of problems with the police and the city council officers. They used to arrest us all the time. But we were just fixed on Prabhupada's mission. And we realized that what he gave us, we could never repay that. He freed us from birth and death. He freed us from the Mayavadi influence. God is a non-person. And he was the only one that was doing that. All these other rascals, they were all preaching their own mental concoctions. But Prabhupada just gave it as it was from the Shastra. And it had an amazing effect. So there's a story in the Bhagavatam. One king, what's his name? Puru Maharaj, maybe. Anyway, he wanted to go with this lady. So he had 4 sons, and he asked them, he was an old man. So he wanted to trade his old age in for the youth of one of his sons so that he could go and be with his new queen. So they all refused. They all had excuses why they shouldn't do that. But then his youngest son, Yayati, I think he was, he said, yeah, you're my father, whatever you command me, I'll do. So he gave him his youth in exchange for his old age. And then, was it Puru? I can't remember now. He went off. For 1,000 years, he tried to enjoy. Then at the end of it, he realized that this is just, nothing. It's worthless. So he came back. He assumed his old age again and gave back the youth to his son. And then his son became the king. So I kind of think that, like that, Prabhupada was old physically. He was given his youth through these young men and women that joined the ISKCON movement. And through using their youth, he was able to do something phenomenal, miraculous. So it's yeah, anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. I think the king's name was King Nahusha, who became old, and Yayati offered it to exchange his youthfulness with him. But
I have to check that.
Yeah, I think
Anyway,
it's
the point is,
Nahusha, but I think lots of devotees know the story. Yeah.
Okay.
Does anyone else have something to say? Otherwise, we'll let Prabhuji take a break, since he's already having some challenges with his throat.
Yeah, it's 10 o'clock here, so.
Yeah. Prabhuji, so are you speaking from Australia?
No, I'm in Mayapur.
Oh, Mayapur. Okay. Well,
Hare Krishna.
Shri Srimad, please, yes.
Please accept my humble obeisances, Prabhuji. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to the assembled devotees. In fact, we are all excited when we heard that you are the ones going to speak today. And sorry I came late. And I wasn't there in the beginning to hear about your health situation until later on, Saturday Prabhu was speaking about that. So I could understand. But it's been a long time. I first met you. I saw you first in 1996 during Centennial. You were the one coordinating the temple activities, the festival activities. So you were just there, to see you with your energy, full, vibrant, handsome. So when I saw you this afternoon or this today, I was wondering, Prabhu, time has really gone. So I could understand now that your health is not very good. So sorry about that. I'm sorry that it is on such a day that you have to come and address us here. Thank you for the wonderful sharing, especially of your early days and Prabhupada memories. And those who have read your books can always have that freshness of all those stories. I have just one question. Maybe I have one question I would like to ask now before you go. There are many things in my head, but I have one that I would like to ask you before you go. You mentioned that I don't know what I had right, but I think I can relate. I can link up the story because there are other things distracting my attention when I was listening. So anyway, I could figure out that you were saying that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj's disciples who went to London, they couldn't make the devotees when somebody asked them, "Can you make us Brahmana?" And they gave all the rules. And then when I think this question was asked to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said it's because they were not sincere. I hope I'm quoting you right.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So Prabhupada said that they were not sincere. Yeah, and that's interesting. We can easily quote that. We can easily sing, Prabhupada's success. We can easily quote that. But today, Prabhu, I want to ask you, and I want you to answer me sincerely. Do you think there are things that Prabhupada asked his disciples to do that today they could not do? And if Prabhupada were to be alive, he would say it's because they are not sincere. Do you get my question?
I wouldn't say that the failure to do something necessarily indicates a lack of sincerity. There may be other factors involved. But specifically about this crew that went there in 1933 to London and came back virtually empty-handed, that Prabhupada was very definitely referring to the leader of that small group, that if he had been sincere, he would have done something. But he went for a year and a half, 2 years. His Guru Maharaj was giving him the money to stay there. And he couldn't produce any real tangible results. And Prabhupada said that was, at least in his case, it was due to a lack of sincerity.
Okay, now I get that clear, and I understand better now. The reason why I asked this question, in spite of the progress and the worldwide spread of Krishna consciousness and much success that was achieved during and after Prabhupada, Prabhupada did say that there was a second part of his mission which was not accomplished, and that is Varnashram. And ISKCON today and ISKCON leaders today have developed, to the best of my understanding, I've developed another kind of philosophy about that. And I'm feeling that this is something Prabhupada would have loved to see happen. Why this is very much in my heart is because Prophet Muhammad, for instance, is known in the world history as the best prophet in the modern age. Because he did not only give the religious life, but he also gave social, political life. Prabhupada was on the verge of doing that. And with his vision of Varnashram, I'm sure that Prabhupada will have exceeded whatever Prophet Muhammad did. But somehow or the other, I think the disciples have done their best, but they're kind of dilly-dallying about this. I'm sorry, I'm not criticizing, but this is what I think. So maybe you can comment on this, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, well, I think that this that's something that's been hanging over our heads for a long time. In 77, when Prabhupada was very sick, just in the last 4 weeks, he had made a comment earlier in the year that I think to Abhiram Prabhu, who was doing his personal service at that time, that I've done 50% of my work. The other 50% said, now you have to do it. That's Varnashram. So we did know that, at least when I was in the GBC there in Australia, because in 77, I was just newly appointed. So we had a plan. We were going to get a farm for each state in Australia, one in New Zealand, and we were going to try and develop this Varnashram system. But mainly due to immaturity and a lack of real understanding, we couldn't implement it. And that was a problem in many places in the world. They got farming communities because you can't have Varnashram unless you're self-sufficient. But what we found is that it's very difficult for devotees who have been brought up in a materialistic culture where to get, a glass of milk, you have to drive down to the store, where kids and people who live in big cities have practically never seen a cow in their lives, except pictures maybe. So it's just very difficult for us to adjust to this principle of simple living and high thinking. We need a motor car, we need a telephone, there's so many amenities that are offered on the material platform. And even if you don't want to have anything to do with it, the government will not allow you practically to be self-sufficient. In Florida, it's illegal to not take power from the main power station. They don't allow you to have alternative facilities. So there's many reasons, but we've been kind of spoiled by our material immersion, and it's just very difficult for us to live on a farm, plow the land with the cow or the bulls. But without that natural food supply, Prabhupada said you'd have to grow your own food, make your own cloth, grow your own medicines, get everything from the land locally. But it's just so far proved to be very difficult. There's only, I think, one place that I know of in ISKCON, that's the farm in Hungary, where they got anywhere near to being 100% supported for getting their own food. So it's there, the idea is there, but I guess we've been distracted on other things. But personally, I think that the Varnashram system can be introduced, but it won't be introduced in the present materialistic culture. We're going to have to wait for some, maybe drastic changes in the world economy. That may give us a boost. When I was in Bhubaneswar with Prabhupada, Rameshwara Swami was there, and he'd been Prabhupada's visiting GBC secretary. So Prabhupada told us about our farms. He said, first, it'll be difficult. Just a few people will do it. But gradually, tens of people will come. Then hundreds of people. and thousands of people. So that's something that we'll see whether that transpires or not. But it's not. I don't think it's not necessarily the lack of sincerity. It's just so difficult to live outside of, the material civilization that's all around us. So something has to give at some point. So let's see what happens. All right.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much. I follow your thoughts. Just last point. What would you say about the Amish people, well settled in America and living alternative lifestyle, also very successful? What would you say about them?
Sorry, who's living in
The Amish?
The Amish people.
Right. Yeah, the Amish, at least they've got some commitment to their lifestyle. Philosophically, I don't know much about them, what their religious practices are, but it's nice. They managed to keep, a few small areas of the Mennonites, the Amish, and a few others. Mainly they're from German descent. So they're like German immigrants that set up. And I guess they've got some kind of religious philosophy, which by sticking to that, then they, they can keep up this rural lifestyle. But they don't do any preaching or anything. You're either born in it or you're not. And that's it. So they maintain for some time. But they are also having problems. They're young people, especially. Materialistic consciousness is all pervading. So we've seen it in ISKCON also. The young people, they don't. We think that we've got all the answers and we can philosophically, shore ourselves up. But our young people, they're also going out, and it's very difficult to resist the offer that material society, gives you. Because I've seen quite a few of them go out, then after a few years, when they get materially burnt out, they come back, but not necessarily, to the point of becoming preachers. But there's a bit of a revival. There's a lot of second generation ISKCON devotees that chanting has become a very popular thing amongst the yoga crowd. So they hold big kirtan festivals. Hundreds and sometimes thousands of people come just to chant. So that's something it's encouraging to see. And as they chant, they get purified. If they come closer to the standards of pure chanting, then they'll become very influential. So let's see anyway how it works. I have to stop now. I'm really croaking.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Thank you. I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
His Grace HARI-SAURI Prabhu. So with this being said, Prabhuji, like we said earlier on, we wish you a speedy, healthy recovery. And we hope to have your association once again in the very near future. And with that being said, we're going to humbly request all the devotees to kindly unmute, and we all chant the loudest Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to express our appreciation to our revered uncle, His Grace HARI-SAURI, to share his love and wisdom with us today. Jai. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare Rama,
Rama Hare Rama,
Hare
Rama Rama, Hare
Pancha Kalpa
Hare.
Taribhyasya, Vasinibhya Vacha,
Jata
Nambinibhya Vaishnavibhya Namo
Sana
Namo,
Bhavantu Vaishnavyo Namo.
Namo. All glories to His Grace Hari-SAURI Prabhu Ki Jai. All glories to Assembled Vaishnavi devotees Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Very well.